Yeah, so of course, when it comes to corporate space, industry space, definitely ransomware, of course, is a big thing for this year. It's been
Yep.
around for a long time, but it's definitely hitting people now. Trying to understand, trying to really watch a lot of organizations, decisions they make, and some of that will be regulatory and push from the government
Yep.
about do we make a payment, do we not, how
Yep.
long do we wait, how long do we negotiate. To me, that's really
It's crazy.
fascinating
Yeah.
questions, right, with no easy answer,
Hmm.
depending on the number one, or what was hit, what assets are actually under siege of that company, but also the nature of that company too.
Yeah.
um, Supply chain is a big thing that I'm
Okay.
watching as well, especially from compliance space. Because one thing to say, okay, we can control ethics and compliance and risk to some degree in our own company,
Hmm.
but how do we impose that on the third party vendors and suppliers
Yes.
that engage with us? Because that stuff will affect you too. So to be honest, I'm interested in a lot of the. I'm seeing a lot of startups, a lot of companies being spun up recently, focus on that third party supplier risk, saying, hey, we'll kind of help be the liaison with compliance and risk assessment with those third parties
Yeah.
before they sign on to you. So that's a very interesting space.
Yeah.
Otherwise, going more personal, still just IoT, right?
Okay.
To
Yep.
me, so lots of IoT, lots of vulnerabilities, and one of the things people don't realize about IoT, especially both personal and even going, because we bring a lot of IoT stuff to the company too, to workplace,
Yep.
is that a lot of these IoT gadgets, as new as they are, they're running software which is like 20, 25 years old underneath,
Yes.
right?
Right.
With vulnerabilities that people really didn't do a good job doing QA on them,
Yep.
doing cybersecurity assessment on them.
Yep.
So a lot of these things are cropping up decades after the fact.
Hmm.
And then on top of that, a lot of the software is shared amongst a lot of different IoT devices across
Okay.
vendors, across models. So if a bad guy finds a vulnerability, and I won't name any vendors, but finds
Sure.
vulnerability in one model, one vendor, there's a good chance that same vulnerability in some way affects all these other vendors. Let's say out of South Korea or out of China or out
Yep.
of some regional area where
Yeah.
it's developed. So that's one space that like recently I've been kind of looking into, especially from my day-to-day job as a pen tester and red teamer doing adversary emulation simulations.
Yeah. It's so interesting because, a couple things you talked about have just kind of hit on the like massive ballooning of, nodes of points of entry or
Yep.
places that can get penetrated, right? Like when you go from I got to manage in the four walls of my company and make sure we're
Yeah.
secure to I need to worry about, the 4,000 walls across all these different vendors outside of me. It's just such a like
Yep.
bigger mountain of work. And then,
Yep.
IoT, like, I don't know, it was probably 10 years ago where like the BYOD thing started,
Yep.
right? Like it was like around, 2008,
Yep.
2010, everyone had Blackberries and it was like, maybe
Yep.
you could do this other thing. And like, it seems like so long ago, but it's not that long. And now people are walking in with a smartwatch and they got,
Yeah.
the step tracker and something else. And there are just so many more things to manage, which I think just speaks to why we need professionals like you in
Yep.
cyber, in pen test, in red team. We need people, in the ethics space to really step up our game because, whatever GDP grows, whatever 2 to 5% a year, depending on what country you're in on average or something, right? And then,
Yep.
your company might be growing 10 to 30% a year. Well,
Yep.
like risks are growing 50 to 300% a year, right? Like
Yep.
how much you have to manage is growing so much. And the thing is, Jamal, the budgets are not growing that fast. So what are
Yeah.
we what
Oh
are,
yeah.
what are you going to do about it? We got to get sharper. We got to get better. We got to invest in ourselves. We got to join communities
Yep.
like NABCRUMP and get
Yep.
networks of people who can help get us sharper
Yep.
because the size of the threat or the risk or just the amount of work to manage is growing faster than we're ready to handle it if
Yeah.
we don't retool, get better software, get better vendors, get
Yep.
a better network of people who can help us do it.
Yeah, and really just put in those frameworks, those policies, those processes, and really that's one thing that I've been focused on professionally now, from a management perspective now, that I've really been happy about with the teams I work for.
Yeah.
One thing that really excites me is when we've done the prep work ahead of time before a fire erupts or emergency
Oh.
happens,
Yep.
that we have those processes or structures in place about managing risk, about documentation, about being, having, preparing for audits and things of that nature.
Yep.
So when something does pop up unannounced, we're ready, right? And that's always a good feeling.
Yeah.